and this was terrible. What is going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. So in today's video, I am going to go over the Speedtrap skills. Now, I do know a lot of players are most likely trying to get like the highest score on most of them. We do know the Speedtrap and like the slaloms and stuff do tend to show up in summits pretty often. So I'm sure a lot of players might be wondering, how do you actually get a higher score on them? And what is one way to actually get faster in many of these speed traps? So if you are wondering, by the way, many of the speed traps can be done with an extra person. That is also going to be why many of them that you do most likely see in a summit is unfortunately going to have like 440 miles an hour. Now, luckily, I'm going to show you guys how you can actually do a tad better and some things you can do to actually approach many of these speed traps a bit better than before. Now, some of this might also come down to the vehicle you are running. Keep in mind, many of the drag cars are going to be fairly similar with their overall speed now, so I would say many of them you could probably run basically any car, but for me I have been running the Dodge Viper SRT10 GTS, which by the way compared to many of the other drag cars does seem to handle pretty dang good, and I would say many players are most likely looking for a drag car that can handle, which by the way drag cars don't, or at least they shouldn't in reality. But the other car you're most likely going to see is the Corvette C7, and of course I have been noticing many players running the Burning Wheels Edition, but that's probably going to come down to the insane top speed of this vehicle. Now, a few things do come into play when going after a higher score in a speed trap. Like, for one, you obviously can run like two people in them, but I would say a lot of players are most likely going to be in the summit solo, so they are most likely not going to have someone that they can run into these summits with. You will also want to have a Nitro Chemist set, guys, which I do know leveling up these drag cars is probably a nightmare. Now, on the flip side of this, though, is the Nitro Chemist set really going to make a big difference when it does come to a speed trap? And a short answer is easily going to be a yes. But at the same time, though, I would say many players might be wondering, do I truly need one to do them? And I hate to say this, guys, but you're most likely going to want to go after one. I do know going after some of these part sets can take like 6 to 8 hours on end. But for my first run, though, I do want to actually do one of these speed traps with only running a regular gold set I do have active. Which, by the way, even though it's not going to be that great, you can still easily do them. On the flip side, I also have to wait for my nitrous. Now that my nitrous bar is fully up, though, I did end up teleporting to a different location. And that's going to come down to the fact that I was at a terrible one before, to at least show you how well the Nitro Chemist set does work when I do run it. But for this one, though, I am going to be running a regular gold set on my vehicle right now. And I would say, guys, even though the Nitro Chemist set was tadly nerfed, it's still going to be amazing on the drag class. Now, from the exact same starting point here with the lovely Dodge Viper, I'm now going to be running a chemist set on my vehicle. Now, what's going to be insane about this, though, is you'll be able to push the car a lot more running this compared to the other one. You're also then going to notice 404 miles an hour on that speed trap. Now, when moving over to a different speed trap, I would almost guarantee that there is going to be one question being asked. All of these speed traps in this game, why do I always have to use a drag car? For example, we have the one here, we have another one over on this side by the Lagoon Beach, and then we also have one over here by the Barber's Point. Now, one thing I have been wondering about many of these speed traps in this game, that is going to come down to the fact that why do I always have to use something like a drag car on them? Now, the main issue with this is, yes, you could run something like an Alpha GP, but with them only doing around 268 miles an hour, that's going to be a problem. And then, of course, on the flip side, you probably could run like a hypercar, but let's be honest, only doing around 300 miles an hour on one of these is probably not going to get you much of any points in a summit. So you are basically forced to use a drag car on every single one, even though some of these are not going to have the most ideal place ever. For example, on the one I'm about to do right now, I did spawn over here to the Dream Bulls event, and you're going to have to go up this road right over here to hit the objective, which of course is going to be in the middle of this road. Now, you obviously cannot come down this mountain because that would make no sense in a drag car. You might actually be able to get away with the spawn point over here, but of course the road's going to be small, and with the AI the way that they are, you know, seeing them right now drive around and watching that one completely go off-roading, you will then notice that probably getting a perfect run in a summit is going to almost be impossible. Now, one of the key factors of getting better at a speed trap is going to come down to the vehicle you are running in them. I hate to say this, guys, but many of the drag cars in this game are not going to be that fun to use. I would even say you probably have to put like settings and stuff on them, but let's be honest though, running something that you don't really have to mess with all that often is probably the best way. And this was terrible. One of the biggest reasons why I'm such a big fan of the Nitro Chemist set is also going to come down to one key factor. Every time you actually do one of these speed traps, you can normally put that car in 4th or 5th gear, and you can basically hit your nitrous and get an insanely high speed with it. And of course the nitrous is going to last around 1.5 times longer than running a regular setter like, not having a chemist active. So I would say it's probably going to be incredibly beneficial to have one. Even some of the more insanely annoying speed traps, at least you can get a decent score hitting that nitrous. Now, spawning back, though, I did end up going on a small side quest going after a crate. I don't know why, but every time my map beeps, I have to go after them. Now, one last thing I did want to mention, though, is a big thing with the speed traps is going to be the traffic. I do know a lot of players are most likely going to, like, try to slipstream or something like that, but keep in mind, you guys can easily get a high score being solo. I do know the traffic's probably going to play a big part in there, but even doing this one right now, though, getting around 285 miles an hour is pretty good. Now, some of the biggest tips I do have, though, for getting better at the speed traps, number one is going to be your car choice. I would actually recommend trying something out like the Dodge Viper SRT10. You could, of course, run something like the C7 or even the Inferno, but I would definitely recommend trying out the Viper. I will also show my vehicle settings for it. This thing really does handle pretty dang good for being a drag car. Don't get me wrong, though, it's not going to corner that good, and it definitely does not go off-road. But my goodness, it's definitely going to be pretty dang decent on the road itself. Now, when it does come to doing good at these speed traps, though, if you are running a chemist, or even if you're not running a chemist, I would recommend hitting your nitrous in the higher gears. So in that last one I did end up hitting around 4th gear and I hit my nitrous. I would actually recommend putting the car in 5th gear, that way it can like basically get more speed out of it. And you will also be able to hit that nitrous when being in 5th gear, which of course is going to make you faster and most likely get you to that objective around 400 miles an hour, at least, depending on traffic and the location of it. But I would definitely recommend trying a higher gear when hitting that nitrous. I would almost say that was one of the biggest things that did help me solo. Like, I would most likely guess, though, that many players, including myself, are most likely going to be running them solo. So I would probably say going after, like, the best vehicle and most likely having the best build possible is most likely going to give you the highest chances of getting a higher score. Now, for the speed traps, though, the main thing I would recommend is to try out the Viper. Don't get me wrong, the C7 is probably good, but putting a decent build on one of these drag cars is like one of the best things ever. On top of that, though, guys, I would definitely recommend putting that car in like a higher gear. And doing that, though, is going to give you that much of a higher top speed when hitting that speed trap. I have been finding this to be insanely useful, guys. Like, I am not kidding. Hitting that nitrous in like the maxed out gear in that vehicle, like for example for the Viper is the 5th gear in it. And when I was finding myself hitting that nitrous in 5th gear, I always made myself that much faster. Sure, you could probably hit your nitrous in like 4th gear, but you're most likely going to redline that thing out around 290 miles an hour. But one of the biggest things I did find, though, is making sure that drag car is going to be in its highest gear. After you hit your nitrous going toward that speed trap, it makes you so much faster. Besides all that, though, let me know in the comments below if you have any questions, and if you happen to miss my video about how to get better at the buoy smashing, you can find that on the screen now.